Hi, I'm Forrest Taylor. I'm a curriculum architect at Red Hat, and today I'll be showing you how to install the Red Hat OpenStack Platform Director, or Undercloud. So the first thing I need to do is get into my Undercloud machine, which I've called Director. So I'll SSH as root at Director. Once I log in as root, I'll run some commands to get things going here. First, I'll do a yum install of the Python O client RPM package. And this package provides the commands necessary to deal with the director. First of all, O is the OpenStack on OpenStack project, thus the 3 O's, and it provides a way to install OpenStack using another OpenStack installation. So we'll start by installing OpenStack on the director node, and then we'll use that to install OpenStack on our regular machines. Now that I've got Python O client installed, I want to add a user that we'll use for the rest of this project. So user add stack, we'll just call it the stack user to be simple. I want to set a password. We'll just use Red Hat as the simple password. That should set the password to Red Hat for the stack user. And then I'll set up some settings for sudo. So I'll edit a etc sudoers.dstack file. So I'll create that and add some settings for the stack user. So for the stack user, I want to provide all commands as root. For this deployment, we'll actually use no password for any of those. And once you're done with the installation, you'll probably want to set that back, so it does require the stack user to enter a password before running sudo. So I'll save that, exit out. And lastly, we'll change the mode on that file to 400. And that should be enough to get us going with sudo and the stack user. So I'll become the stack user. And we'll just run a quick sudo test, make sure everything's working, no password, everything looks good. So now I want to create a configuration file that we use for the Undercloud. So if I get the file from user share instack-undercloud, undercloud.conf.sample, and we'll call it the undercloud.conf file. That's the file that I'll use to actually deploy the Undercloud. So let's take a look at that file. You'll see that it has a default section up at the top. It also has several options that are available here, and it provides a bunch of information as well from describing what each of those options does. So if you are interested in any of these, take a look at the configuration file, read about the information that it has there, and then you can set some values. Now what I'll do is set some values under default, so I'll go through and explain some of these. Again, if you need more information, feel free to read through the document. It has some great information there. So first off, local IP. I will provide the local IP address for this installation. So 172.25.250.10 is my local IP address. The Undercloud public VIP, or virtual IP address, we'll use 172.25.250.110 for that. So that would be the way to get to it from the public side. We have some pretty simple networking in class, so we'll use the admin virtual IP as the same, on the same network as the public virtual IP. If you had a more complicated setup, you'd probably want to keep these in separate networks so that your admin network was on the management network interface, and the public virtual IP would be on the public side. So undercloud _admin _vip is 172.25.250.111. All right, so we'll just use those as some random IP addresses in essence that we can use for the public IP and for the admin IP. Local interface is next. And we'll use ETH0. We just have a single Ethernet card here, so we'll keep it simple. And masquerade network. We'll use 172.25.250/24, so we'll use that same network that we've used before. And we need to set up some DHCP settings. DHCP_start, we'll use 172.25.250.20, and DHCP end, we'll use .30. So we'll just go from 20 to 30 for our DHCP IP addresses. We'll use that when we deploy the Overcloud, so it gets IP addresses within that range. Next, the network CIDR is 172.25.250.0/24. Again, we're just using that same network that we've used for all the other IP addresses. And the gateway, 172.25.250.10. You'll notice that's actually our local IP address. So we'll use, once we deploy the Overcloud, we will use the IP address of director to provide the gateway to get out through that network. And finally, the inspection_IP range. So 150 through 180. We'll use that as the IP range for the introspection. We'll talk more about introspection when we get to the Overcloud deployment. All right, so I just want to double check my settings here, make sure that you get the right IPs and other things that are available for your machines. So if you have different IP addresses, you want to change these. If you're following along in a classroom, simply fill out the same IP addresses that we're using here. So the local IP address is 172.25.250.10. That looks good. Undercloud public VIP is .110.111 for the admin virtual IP address. Local interface is ETH0. Masquerade network is 172.25.250.0. Start and end is 20 to 30 for the DHCP server. And the network CIDR is 172.25.250.0. Network gateway is .10, so that's the same IP address we had for local. And finally, the introspection IP range is 172.25.250.150 through 180. All right, that looks good to me, so let's go ahead and continue. Let me save the file, exit out, and then we can start the deployment of the Undercloud. So the command is simply OpenStack Undercloud install. And that will run through a bunch of commands in order to get the Undercloud installed. It uses the undercloud.conf file by default in the local directory where I ran that deployment command from. And you'll see it installs packages. It runs through various commands for setting up the database. And really what it's doing is deploying OpenStack in order to allow us to deploy a larger OpenStack deployment. So we'll wait as this continues to run through. Okay, so you'll see that the deployment is now finished. It wrapped up with some flavor creation. I did a bunch of installation using Heat, and Heat is the orchestration service that it uses as a template in order to deploy the Undercloud for us. So lastly, you'll notice that there is a stackrc file that it mentions in my current directory in homestack stackrc. We'll use that to have the information that is needed to deal with the Undercloud. So let me clear off the screen and I'll source that file. So source homestack stackrc. and that will provide some settings for us in order to connect to the deployed Undercloud. And now I can run a few commands to see what happened. So OpenStack endpoint list shows me some endpoints for the services. So it set up things like Swift, Nova, Keystone, Heat, etc., etc. So this is your standard OpenStack commands. So it indeed installed OpenStack for us as the Undercloud. Let's see, we'll also do an OpenStack host list. That will show us which hosts were configured during this deployment of the Undercloud. You'll notice on the host name side they're all director.lab.example.com. So I installed everything on this single machine, director, and it provided the scheduler, the conductor, compute node, and so on. And that allows us to have a real OpenStack deployment to do our further OpenStack deployment using OOO. Let's see, let's check a couple other things. So first of all, if I cat out the os-net-config.json file in Etsy, that shows me the settings that we used for networking for this deployment. And actually there's a quick trick that you can do if you want to have a more human-readable format for this. Python has a great filter for JSON. So if I run python-m and use the json.tool module and put in that file, you'll see it's much easier to read this way. So it has a network config address, has an IP address of 172.25.250.10, which is my director IP address. It's using eth0 as the interface, and there's a BRCTL plane bridge, so that's the control plane bridge that it uses, and it attached eth0 to that. So to see that, we'll just do a ovs-vs-ctl show to show all of the bridges, and you'll see down near the bottom, at least in my case, there's a control plane bridge that includes eth0. It also has some other interfaces using OVS as well. So this is the bridge that is used for our configuration. And lastly, it actually created a configuration file for us in Etsy sysconfig network scripts, ifcfg br-control plane. And you'll see that it is type OVS bridge. This is using OpenVSwitch as the bridge to manage this particular piece. The BRCTL plane bridge is the device name, and it has an IP address of the .10 that we configured, so it moved the information from eth0 over to this bridge and attached eth0 as the device to use for this bridge. You'll notice it also has some extra settings there for OpenVSwitch, including the MAC address and some other settings as well. This has been the deployment of the Red Hat OpenStack Platform Director, or Undercloud, in the Red Hat OpenStack Administration 2, or CL210 course. Good luck in the course.